Hi, my name is Randy. I'm doing a book review today. You may know me as Randy Pischel or Star Thinker. I've been Star Thinker since 1979. I did trademark that in the state of Iowa, so uh, not trademark. I registered Star Thinker because I had a business at one time called Star Thinker, so that still stands, and I still have to do taxes on it. So anyway, I'm sitting here because I just read Thrill the Chase, and as you know, I've kind of been using this channel for a lot of different things. I've used it to talk about paranormal events. I've used it to talk about my book, and I've used it to talk about Forrest Fenn's treasure. So today is going to be a Forrest Fenn video, and I bought the Thrill the Chase after much apprehension because I didn't think it was really needed, and I also thought that my own biases would blind me to anything I might find in there, and I think it did because it proved my theory right. So anyway, I'm going to talk about the book. First of all, as a book, I can't. As a book, I don't know. It's not a book I would have been interested in. It's little anecdotes from Forrest Fenn's life, and we all have anecdotes from our life. He wanted people to know these, and um, having the treasure hunt, I think he used that to make sure people bought this book and learn these stories of his life because he seems proud that he had these adventures, and everybody, you know, every it kind of sticks in my mind that everybody has adventures. I'm an 80-year-old man, and I've had everything on these shelves back here is something I've kept because of an adventure. And there's actually, I have four of these and a fifth one over there. I went from a 5-bedroom 4-story house to a 450-foot apartment in Denver. Literally, I couldn't even unload the truck, and I put a Craigslist ad out. I said, "Look, I'm going to open up the back of my truck if you guys want to come and get something." Luckily, within one day, my truck was emptied out. Mostly books. I think I estimated 6 to 7 thousand books, and I gave them all away. I kept a few that might want to read again, but I thought, you know what? It's nice to have books, it's nice to keep them, but I would probably never read them again, especially that many of our ones that I hadn't read in the first place. So, um, yeah, I willed my life down to what was important to me. And then when I moved back to Iowa, I did move into a 3-bedroom house. I started to accumulate a few things again. But again, I moved into this here. This is about a 400 square foot studio. And so I don't even have rooms, you know. Um, but yeah, I've only kept the things that mean something to me and mean something to my life. And I think because I've had this experience, I don't think many people have had to do this kind of thing, but I can see where he's coming from. He's got stories he wants to tell, and he just wanted people to know them. But everybody does, and to me, the stories in there were just kind of okay. That was a slice of life from his life. And that's another slice of his life, a day in the life. And there were a few things when he talked about the passing of his father and covering up Philadelphia with his thumb. Kind of got philosophical, and I kind of could see, that kind of made me pause and think, which is good for a book to do. But overall, as a book, it was a book. So let me get into the other aspect of the book, and that is that this book does contain hints to the poem. At least he says it contains hints to the poem. And so in that respect, I don't know, there's only a few things that jumped out at me because he said to read the book, read the poem, memorize the poem, and then read the book again, and you might find hints that'll help you with the poem. Now, the only hint you really need with the poem is where warm waters start, because if you know where that is, you could pretty much do a trial and error run from there and find the home of Brown, find the blaze, but you got to find where warm waters start first. So I think if there was any hints in the book, those would be the hints to look for, is where would warm waters start. And so having read the poem over and over again, and I have it mostly memorized, there were passages in the book that just kind of leapt out at me. And, anytime I saw a word in the book, like there's 2 pages where he mentions a canyon on each page. And, canyons mentioned in the poem. And so I was like, what does, so my mind started going there. Like, okay, he mentions canyon in the book. Does it have anything to do with the canyon in the poem? And so I kind of reread those pages. There's another passage where he talks about a bronze, I'm going to say Native American, because I'm kind of, I know Native Americans and they get really upset when you use the word Indian. So, the Native American bronze statue, and he asked kids to touch it, and he asked them if it was going to be warm or cold, and they thought it would be warm because it was a warm day in a warm room, but it felt cold to the touch. And he asked them to figure out why and then write him back. And the only letter he mentions that he got back was a letter that said, "You're a fraud." And his explanation, he said, well, a lot of people don't realize that your hands are warm, and when you feel something that's room temperature, like a bronze statue, it's going to feel cool to the touch just because your hands are warm. And that made sense to me. And I've actually did an experiment about that in high school. And it's like, so why would he mention that the only letter he got back was a letter that said, or the only letter he mentions, I don't know if he got more, but the one he mentions was the letter back that says, "My dad says you're a fraud." So it got me thinking, like, where warm waters halt might be warm, but could still feel cool to the touch. I know he said you have to get in and feel comfortable in the water and dip your toes in the water and it would feel comfortable, but I don't know. That just reached out to me and said, hey, maybe maybe he meant waters that are warm, even though they feel cool, they're going to be warm. And he mentions he's a fraud because he said, oh yeah, it's going to feel warm, which is what the kids thought. Anyway, circular thinking. I just thought, could that mean that where warm waters halt isn't as warm as we think it is? It's warm, but not to the touch, and therefore he's making that part up because it's a fraud. But he did say it in the very first part of the book, like, that he's going, how can you tell a story without embellishing it? How can you tell a story without making it more of a story? So, I take that with a grain of salt, but that still leapt out at me the same way the word canyon leapt out at me. There was a couple other things. And then some of his stories, like, now I've hiked a lot in the Rocky Mountains, and twice I've come across cars where there shouldn't be cars. Like, you're in the middle of the woods, there's trees all the way around you, and here's a car. One car was like a 1940s, I think it was a Plymouth. It's actually marked on Google's map, because I looked it up afterwards to see if there was a kind of a road or anything where this car could get there, but there's like a little pin that says, old car. I'm like, okay, so this car's been there since like the 40s. It's rotted a certain amount, but it's still, you can still tell the shape. You can still tell it was a Plymouth. There's still an engine block. There's still springs where the seat were, so it's like one of the things that, and it's just a curiosity. Like, he mentions about the car that went into the creek and lost its front axle. And I can only imagine that they left it abandoned there. And I'd love to, that's one thing I'd love to do is go and say, oh, hey, here's an engine block in a creek and it's probably his car. That would just be a neat little thing. 'Cause I know someone went to Vietnam and found pieces of his plane that got shot down. How hard can it be to go find pieces of his car that got wrecked in a creek? And I know back then, you wreck a car, a lot of people would just get up and walk away from it. So I can't imagine they went back and tried to retrieve it or anything. At least in the book, he never mentions that they did. Some other things that leapt out at me, and I don't know. Now, I've watched hundreds and hundreds of videos about every aspect of this hunt. And one thing I never saw was anyone referencing the dates in the book. I Googled the dates in the book, and none of them are right. Well, at least I spot checked 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I spot checked 7 of them. Some of them have the date like blurred out, and to me it looked like it said 1893, but I know it probably said like 1933 or something like that. But it was blurred out, and so those dates I kind of left alone. But the other dates, I googled some of them. Like one of the stamps is 25th August 1937, and he's got Thursday. But the 25th of August 1937 was a Wednesday. The 2nd of September 1943 was a Thursday, but he had it marked as Sunday. 16th September 1936 he had marked as a Monday, and it was a Wednesday. So like I said, I spot checked a bunch of these. 8 August 1947, 7 September 1949, 16 September 1936. So the days don't match up. So part of me is like, okay, so they just made up dates that were probably close to what he remembers for that chapter, and put them in there. And then the other part of me is like, because I'm a coder and I write codes and I put codes in books before. And so part of me was looking at that thinking, like, is that a code? From Wednesday to Monday is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. That's 3 days. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. That's 5 days. Are these significant in any way? Are the real days significant in any way? So that's where my mind went. I don't know. I might play with this a little bit, but like I said, there's some dates that are blurred out. Some dates had a little 039 after them, and that could be like, I don't know. I don't study stamps. I don't know stamp markings. That could be the last part of an area code or a zip code. Some of them had AM, PM marked on them, which I have seen on stamps. But the 039 was on a significant number. Did I spot check any of the 03? Yeah, I did spot check. 15 April 1938 was a Friday, but he had it marked as a Wednesday, and then it had the 039 after it. So that's something, and I know like in Michael Stather's book, the first letter of every chapter was a drop cap, and that's the big fancy letters that authors put at the beginning of a chapter. And they were significant. And he passed away before he let us know how significant they were, but we knew that had something to do with the colors and the shapes, and the letters themselves had something to do with the solve of that. And so like these are at the beginning of chapters. There's one in the front cover, one in the back cover. I also wrote down, I started to write down the place names, because there's some books that I believe the place names were significant. But after about half the book, there was just so many place names, and they were all over the world, because he talked about places in Vietnam. He talked about New York and the East Coast, and so none of them were like really in the Hunt area. There were a few in the Hunt area, and I did write those down. And then he talked about the lake. I'm gonna pronounce this wrong. Hebgen. Anyway, it's a lake. It's formed by a dam. He talked about that a little bit. That's near. Well, I'm not even gonna say it. He talks about like Red Canyon, and there's some places he does talk about that's in the area of the 4 states that he says that is north of Santa Fe, where the treasure's hidden. So those jump out at me too. The places he talked about in Cody and Casper and Shoshone, and I'm looking at my notes that I took while reading the book. After the Bronze Indian, he talked a lot about frogs, and so it made me start thinking about frogs. He put frogs on his bronze bells, and there's frogs in the tress itself. So it made me think that maybe frogs have something to do with anything. I don't recall frogs being discussed anywhere, but he seemed to have a penchant for frogs, and like I have a penchant for giraffes. In fact, if I get really close here, I can see like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 giraffes. I have at least 150 giraffes. Or look at over here. There's giraffes here. I have at least 150 giraffes in my 400 square foot studio apartment. There's something else I collect. I have over 250 of, but I won't even say what that is. But giraffes. Giraffes are just something. First I think giraffes are magnificent. I can't say it. Fantastic beast. They're they're graceful and they're elegant and the way they run. And if you've ever seen a giraffe fight another giraffe, it's just a sight to behold. Um, I I go to the zoo and I used to feed the giraffes at the zoo, and just that's where I hung out was, I had a year pass at the zoo in Denver and they have giraffes. And I don't know, it's not something I'm obsessed with, but if I'm out somewhere and I see a giraffe and I have to think, do I want this giraffe? These two behind me, I walked through this huge antiques mall, and it was like one of the, because there's antiques mall that are just huge and they have hundreds and hundreds of booths in them. And I remember thinking, there's no giraffes this entire antique. And so the more I thought about it, the more I was watching out for them. And just as I was walking out the door, I spotted these two, and I saw the price. And I thought, well, do I want to pay that much for one of these giraffes? And then I saw on the price it said that the price was for both of them, and I was like, sure, I'll pay that much for both giraffes. And I can't. In fact, I'm going to turn the camera here. I don't know if I want to or not. Anyway, I have a stand over here with all the wooden giraffes I have. One I found in the middle of a desert. I kid you not, I was in the middle of a desert down by Grand Junction, Colorado. Not Grand Junction, La Junta, which means junction, in Colorado. I was hiking in the desert there. I'd hiked for maybe a mile, and there was an old shack, and the only thing in this old shack was a giraffe. And to me, that is just an amazing coincidence, and I had to keep it. And it's one of the story. If I was writing a story of my life, that would be one of the stories in the book. Was that day I was in the middle of nowhere in a desert by La Junta, and I found a giraffe in a rundown shed. I bet you 2 years later that shed didn't even exist anymore. It was on the verge of collapse. So I found it at just the right time, and it's sitting right over here. But there's other times where I've gone to like an estate sale, and there might have been 2 or 3 carved giraffes, and horribly expensive because hand carved from Africa, and I couldn't buy just one. I had to keep the family together. And I have a friend who makes fun of me for this, but like I can't split up the family. So a lot of the giraffes I have was because they were part of a set. I couldn't break up the set. But a lot of them, like this one here, is a beaded giraffe. It was handmade in South Africa. A friend of mine had a daughter down there studying meteorites in South Africa because they're all over because it's illegal to pick them up. And so there's lots of them down there. You can't export them. But she was studying them down there, and she knew a little kid, and the little kid weaved this beaded giraffe, and this friend of mine knew I collected giraffes, and she had it exported. So like there's a whole story behind. Like I said, everything on these shelves, there's a whole story behind, and so that means a lot to me. I'll always keep that giraffe. That giraffe will be here when I die. And do I want to be buried with it? And probably not. But to me, it's a story. It's a part of my life. It'll be a little paragraph somewhere. But anyway, getting back to the book, some things he talks about jumped out at me, like the canyons. He talked about canyons in his hand. His hands got white and had canyons in them. To me, that just seems like a hint somehow, but I don't know how. He also talked about red canyons. So he talked about red canyons and then white canyons, and within a page of each other. And then the bronze Native American, it just felt like he was maybe explaining what warm waters were. And then the dammed lake, and and then the frogs. So some of these things, I don't know if they're hints. Probably not. I did find a few things that I'm not even going to mention. But like, I have a solve in my head that I just love, and it fits beautifully. It fits smoothly. It fits without any manipulation. And to me, that's probably closer to a solve than something that's convoluted. If you got 20 steps in your solve, I don't know, that might not be right. But if you have one step in your solve, to me, that's closer to a truth than one that has 20 steps in it. So, my solve is really simple. It's Anyway, it's really simple and smooth. And then when I was reading certain passages, I was like, that smoothly fits into my solve. And, those things jump out at me. And again, that's probably my own bias making things up inside my head. But I did take snapshots of that and send it to my friend that I did talk to this. I talked to him about my solve and um, said, look, this was in the book. What do you think? And they're like, well, yeah, that does seem suspicious. So, but anyway, the dates struck me. I don't recall seeing anyone talking about the dates. I mean, I didn't, when I was looking them up, I didn't look at what happened on those dates specifically because I figured that wasn't important, but maybe I will. But they have the day wrong. How hard is it to look up a date? I mean, I did 7 in probably 5 minutes before I made this video. How many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, I did 7 just like that. So why make up the days? Why didn't he just take 5 minutes and make the days align with the dates? Yeah, he did talk about Yellowstone a lot. I would like to find that car. That would be really interesting. Just because any other abandoned car I would not care about, but just because this is part of the treasure hunt, I wouldn't mind finding that. Just like someone went out and found parts of his plane. That must have cost a fortune for that guy. But it was worth it to him because now he's got parts of the plane. He could present it to him. But that car, I would imagine, is still there in some form. So that wraps it up. And there were a bunch of numbers I wrote down. I'd have to go back to those pages and find out why I wrote down these numbers. But numbers must have meant something. I see the number 13 over and over again, so we'll see what that's about. But anyway, that's my review of the book. And hopefully I learned something. Hopefully you guys learned something. And we'll find out. I guess the only way we're going to find out is when someone finds the treasure and see how everything fits into their solve. But anyway, Star Thinker, go ahead, look up some of my books on Amazon. Look under Randy Pischel, and you'll find a bunch of them. I was going to give a clue out, but I'm not going to do that, I guess. But go ahead and read the book again and tell me what you think about the dates. And like I said, if someone knows someone who's discussed the dates before, go ahead and drop me a note down below, and I'll look it up. But anyway, this has gone on for over 20 minutes, so that's my limit. So I'm going to go ahead and sign off. And you guys have a great day.